Well, Oprah once quoted, challenges are gifts that force us to search for a new center of gravity. Don't fight them, just find a new way to stand. A very warm welcome to our respected dignitaries and dear students. On behalf of the Institution of Innovation Council, Amity University, Haryana, Amity Business School, and Amity Innovation Incubator, Gurgaon, I, Deborah, welcome you all to this session. To our delight, we have with us Ms. Ekta Jaffrey, a storyteller who works to translate your vision into a usable, monetizable product. An outcome oriented expert who can create, diagnose, and repair experiences through research led analysis. A usability analyst, design thinking coach, product designer, and strategist, we have a gem amongst us. Amity University Gurgaon has a vision to develop to a full industry integrated university, providing a global platform for nurturing talent. Achieving academic excellence are one of the things that expresses the core philosophy of Amity University Gurgaon and is the driving force behind rigorous academic programs and high quality teaching, which is still a spirit of learning among students. We here at Amity University Gurgaon strongly believe in relentless pursuit of innovation and excellence at all levels of activities. Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India has established MHRD's Innovation Cell MIC to systematically foster the culture of innovation amongst all higher education institutions. The primary mandate of MIC is to encourage, inspire, and nurture young students by supporting them to work with new ideas and transform them into prototypes while in their informative years. MIC has envisioned encouraging creations of institutions innovation council. IIC is selected across HIEs. A network of these IICs will be established to promote innovation in the institution through multiple modes, leading to an innovation productions ecosystem in the campuses. Amity University Haryana Institution Innovation Council, along with Amity Innovation Incubator and Entrepreneurship Cell, are primarily responsible for fostering entrepreneurial skills among students and assisting budding entrepreneurs by providing them with necessary resources. Well, moving on. The man who has always encouraged new ideas and motivated us to achieve more and more. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Vikas Madhukar, Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor, Dean and Faculty of Management Studies, Director, Amity Business School, and President, Institute Innovation Council, Amity University, Haryana, for delivering the welcome address. Please, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. On behalf of our Honorable Founder President, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, on behalf of our Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Asim Chauhan, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. P.V. Sharma, on behalf of entire community of staff, students, and faculty of Amity University, Haryana, I, on behalf of everyone, extend a very warm welcome to you to this session. Ekta ji is very well connected with us and has already taken a session on design thinking twice with the students. So I still remember the first time when we have approached her for a session during our orientation program. And there were large number of students. I think almost 1,000 plus students were connected to that session. And as a part of process, we always used to take feedback on each and every session. And when we took a feedback from the students, we found the highest rating for the session of design thinking, which was taken by Ekta ji. So then we've decided, I mean, we should have this session, we should repeat this session, and we should have more and more student listening to her. And probably, I'll speak to her after this session that how we can plan a series of workshop on design thinking so that when Ekta ji is speaking to the student, right, it is a limited time of 1 hour. So where it is not possible for her to explain and go into detail and doing hands-on with the student. on the concept of design thinking, because this concept is such an important and vast concept that only one way communication from the resource person is not sufficient for the student to understand this concept. Design thinking is something which require in everywhere when we are talking about improving the existing processes, when we're talking about bringing some innovation in the existing processes, or we want to develop anything new. While you will go to the definition of design thinking, it is simply defined that it is a process of solving problem by prioritizing the customer needs above all else. So ultimately, the focus is on understanding your customer needs, your user requirement, finding out the solution of that problem, and then going into the brainstorming while you are implementing it, that it should be workable. So I can recall a popular song, very popular old song. The lyrics of that song is, जो तुमको हो पसंद वही बात कहेंगे, तुम दिन को अगर रात कहो रात कहेंगे. So it is just like that. So where we are here to understand the customer needs, customer problem, and sometimes, although it is not always goes like that sometimes the customer is also not aware about what exactly is required from his end, or what is required. So sometimes the process is meant in a way that it also provide a good insight to the customer to understand his or her needs. So it is something, the whole process leads to a kind of customer delight and bringing a very good user experience and user interface. So I'm sure that the session is going to bring a lot of insight into the concept of design thinking, and it is going to provide useful input to the participants. And I'm sure that this session will ignite the thought process of all participants, so that they can also look into the problems and issues from a different perspectives to find out the better solution. With these few words, I won't take more time. I want my esteemed resource person to start with the session. Once again, I extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Ekta Jafri. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Madhukar. Thank you so
Well,
much for that warm welcome, and I'm so glad that the students could actually resonate with the last session that we held. I will, of course, be very glad to extend support in terms of getting the students to understand enterprise design thinking much better.
And
And
Ekta ji,
well,
I can recall our discussion when the first time I had a discussion with you. The first question you asked is, "What is the time allotted to me?" So I said that the time allotted is 2 hours. Then you said that because design thinking is such a concept which is should not be one way, where until and unless you will have the involvement of participant and they will have some hands-on and case studies, right? This cannot be understand. So on the same line, I thought that why not we should hold a series of few workshop, and the next workshop will be based on the previous and will be an advance to the next stage of the previous one, so that maybe the that will give a more detailed insight about the whole process and more learning to the students. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for those kind words. It's really, we've all got a small insight to how exciting this session is going to be. Well, before I introduce our most respected speaker in today's Corporate Connect session, I would like to request our eager participants to put your questions in the chat box, which will be taken up during the QA round at the end of the session. Well, so now I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Ekta Jaffrey, Design Director, Thought Leader, and Coach at IBM, designing the future one step at a time with multiple successful products in the market. Ms. Jaffrey is a sustainability advocate and data privacy activist who walks the talk. She is also the author of Sienna Tales, speculative fiction on how things pan out for us in 2030. Ms. Ekta Jaffrey has got a certification in usability testing, user experience from Human Factors International, her bachelor's in English literature from Delhi University, and lastly, her high school majoring in sculpture from International School of Bangkok. And anything I say further is likely to put the lights out because Miss Jaffrey comes from countless tales. And so, with a wide expanse in the sea of knowledge, let us listen to her winds in her sail. Miss Jaffrey, I would like for you to take over the session, ma'am, please.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Uh, yes, I'm basically a designer who's learned from the school of life. Um, Although not everybody gets a chance to do that, but I was very lucky to be put in situations where I could learn both academically and understand the industry from a designer's perspective inside out. I was very lucky to be in this ecosystem at a point where design was only a word, as at a point where user experience design was a concept that everybody agreed was important but didn't know how to go about it, to a place where a lot of companies today know exactly what to do, and they reach out to us and tell us, this is what you want, what we want you to fix. We want you to use service design to create our services. We want you to use future foresight methods to be able to divine our future. We want you to fix this problem using enterprise design thinking. So customers today understand what is it that they need to get done, and they come to us. And that whole industry maturity, I think everybody who's going to be passing out from here on is in a very lucky place to be in an industry which is already design led. And how can you flow with the flow of the industry? How can you be design led as well? I think that's something I'm here to talk about today. So let me share my screen. I'm gonna just share my screen. So when I was contacted to do a session on problem solving and critical thinking, I thought, how should I go about it? How should I introduce it to students who are already introduced to a lot of critical thinking methods, to a lot of problem solving methods in their daily studies as well? And management studies teach you that, right? Um, so I thought the perfect way to do it would probably be take them on a design led journey, to tell you a design led story. The design led story is how design thinking, and specifically enterprise design thinking, helps you solve problems at scale and helps you critically think about the ideas you generate as well as the stories you tell. Yeah. So I'm just going to go forward and try and play a movie. I hope you guys can hear it. So that's basically in a nutshell what enterprise design thinking is. When people come together to look at complex problems at scale, when they follow the three-part method of observe, reflect, make. And what does that really mean? So let's break that down bit by bit. Yeah. Um, how do you really build things that matter? How do you really build things that make a difference in people's lives? How do you solve complex challenges? Usually, challenges are not a singular thing. It is not something that you can fix a server and fix the challenge, which comes to organization and organizations at scale today. Organizations at scale today face very complex challenges. So the complexity of the challenges involves people at one end. It also involves the processes which an organization has, right? Business processes. It also involves technology. So it's like a triad of people, process, and technology that you bring together to to solve a challenge. But how do you really, where do you start, right? You start with people. The reason why you start with people is because human beings are powered by emotion. They're not just powered by reason, right? So when we look at, let's look at a business meeting where three CEOs are sitting discussing how the company may be able to merge and take things forward on a product. When they're sitting and they're talking about it and they're coming to a decision, right? So their decisions are powered not just by the logic that says two companies, when they come together, they'll bring their people together, they'll bring their processes together, and they'll bring their technologies together, but they're also powered by emotion. The emotion to make a difference, the emotion to be bigger than you already are, the emotion of ambition, the emotion of desire, right? So there are emotions which power decisions that are made even in boardrooms, even at very large levels. When decisions are made, they're powered by emotions, not just reason, right? So it helps when you look at emotions, and it helps when you look at user experience, because user experience is what really contributes to the emotions that you're feeling. Let me illustrate that by a story. I usually like to start with a story, and this is the story of Doug Dietz, who used to be the design principal at GE Healthcare. Now, how many of you really know this machine? Uh, can I see hands up? Do people know this machine? What this machine is? Deborah, could you read if anybody is answering in chat, because I can't see the chat from here? Nope, nobody. Okay.
We've got
So
two hands.
we got two hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's allow them to speak. Can I do that?
They'll probably not be able to answer. You may not be able to hear them
Okay.
since it's being
Then they
streamed. Yeah.
checked MRI. That's absolutely right, guys. Truly, Tanima Sharma. Congratulations, Tanima Sharma. Actually, it is absolutely an MRI. The 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 biggest wave that the MRI machine made in the medical healthcare industry was that the MRI was a non-invasive procedure. So earlier, when a doctor had to look inside you, when he had to look inside your body, he had to perform something called an X-ray or a CAT scan or a CT scan. Both X-rays and CT scans are radioactive in nature, and when you get them done, they do affect you. So the doctor usually tells you can't have more than one X-ray in 6 months, because the X-rays are radioactive in nature, and they do affect your body over a large period of time. They are invasive. So the MRI machine used magnetic resonance imaging. It uses the power of magnets to be able to visualize your body from inside. So scientifically, it's a huge advancement, right? So Doug Dietz was very happy, and he went to various clinics to find out how people were experiencing this machine, right? And he saw this machine being used, but he also saw that whenever an elderly person or a child used to come to go inside that machine to get themselves checked, they had to be sedated, and that was very worrying for him. the power of the machine, the power of the MRI is that you don't have to invade anybody's body to be able to see it. If you're invading it with a syringe, then you're still invading the body, right? Then it's still an invasive procedure that actually goes against the very principle that the MRI stands for. So he was very worried. He was extremely sorry. He just plugged this in because it started showing me. Yeah. So he got very worried. He basically then he realized that he may need to go back to the drawing board to actually work out the kinks in the product that he has. It is a product that is meant to non-invasively check out a human being's body. And how does it happen that everybody who comes in maybe is an elderly person or a child? Usually that's when most MRIs are done, right? When you're elderly or when you're a child. So that means a large percentage of his patients are actually being invaded to get the MRI done, which actually defeats its purpose. So he went back to the drawing board. He went back to the drawing board. He sat with children. He tried to understand what is children's perspective. Absolutely, Tanima. They're more prone to diseases, and if they're more prone to diseases, those are the people getting the MRI done, right? So that makes 80% of your customers. Using the Pareto principle, the 80% of your customers that really matters is taken up by 20% of your actual percentage of people. So it's those 80% that really matters to you. And with these 80% of customers, if you're defeating the purpose, then it actually defeats the purpose of the product itself. So doctors started prescribing the MRI less and less, and the CAT scan more and more. So he went back to the drawing board. He went to kindergartens and to figure out what can he fix. What he realized that stories have a big power over children. Children can spend hours. They can spend hours with a chair and a blanket and an umbrella, for instance, because they build stories. So what he did was that he built stories around his MRI machine. In this one, you see the MRI machine looks like a submarine. And no child is actually afraid to go inside a submarine. They want to go there. They're eager to go inside. Similarly, a jungle scene or a pirate ship or another kind of a cave, right? So using the power of imagination, he was able to make a product which is, and not by not even touching the original product. He didn't touch any of the product specifications. Medical products are very hard to bring into the market because medical products require a certain amount of clinical trial. They require a certain amount of time for the products to be tested before they're taken out into the market. So without touching the product, without going back to clinical trial, he made sure that the product was now accepted by children. And therefore, if the child is going inside without sedation, then an elderly person also thinks, then they also think that's a child who's going inside. Can I also go inside? So it basically solved that problem of invasiveness for him without even touching the product. And that's the user mentality. That's the mentality of keeping users front and center when you build something, not just technology, right? Because technology is important. So are processes. So are business processes. Processes are extremely important from a scale perspective. But people are of the primary importance. And if you talk to people in the right way, if you communicate to people in the right way, if you give them the right information at the right time, there's absolutely no reason why people should not do what they should do, right? So the best way to move people along is to understand where they are, is to understand their context and give them the right cues to move on ahead. And they're able to do so organically. We found that out through products that we've released in the market again and again, that people are able to adopt products organically if the user experience of the product is indeed set right. So what do we do to ensure that our user experience is actually to the point, and it's actually perfect every time. We immerse ourselves in the user, and we follow what is called the enterprise design thinking methodology. The enterprise design thinking methodology is represented by a loop. It's an infinite loop. The reason why an infinite loop is because we infinitely follow the framework of observe, reflect, make, observe, reflect, make, observe, reflect, make, every time we do any iteration of the product, which basically means when we're putting something together, we put it on the basis of research, on the basis of observation. We use research. We triangulate research from three places. We triangulate research from primary research, where we talk to actual users, and any research, any perspective cannot be complete without actually talking to users, because that's where you can actually read between the lines. And what Professor Madhukar was talking about was the fact that not every user will be able to tell you at scale whether he wants something or not, or how much he wants something, or how much he needs something. It is you as a user researcher. And user researcher is another profession today. A user researcher is able to probe deep into the user's mind and read between the lines and understand what their hidden desires, motivations, pain points, barriers are. And once you find that out, you bring that to the table and you reflect. And you see these four dots that are there in the middle of that diagram, right? These three green dots and one yellow dot. What does that mean? Because you reflect always with a multidisciplinary team, a team that consists of all the people who are needed to make a difference in this problem statement. So when you bring a problem statement to the table, you research enough, you find out enough about it, and you reflect with the right people. I cannot stress enough on the importance of bringing the right multidisciplinary teams together to reflect on a problem. And that's what leads to making the right thing. That's what leads to the right ideation. And that's what leads to problem solving at the end. Now, I know somebody will ask me, what is that yellow dot for? So that there are three green dots, but there's one yellow dot. What is that for, right? That yellow dot actually represents somebody who we call the sponsor user. The sponsor user keeps us sane, basically. A sponsor user is somebody we involve from the user set within the reflection itself, so that the moment we generate an idea, we can validate it from the user. We can ask, do you think that's a good idea? And it's as simple as that. It's as simple as asking, do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that's a product you would use? Do you think that this product would solve your problem? So it's very simple to do that when your sponsor user is sitting on the same table with you. And that's one of the principles of enterprise design thinking as well. Which brings us to make. Make is when we create intentions. First of all, we create visions, and then we create products, and then we create solutions which answer our need to reach that vision. So the first step of make is telling a story. Telling the story right. That basically means that the story of your solution and the difference that it's going to make in your user's life has to be paramount and in front of you as a vision. When it's paramount and in front of you as a vision, it guides everything you do. It also guides the next loop around observe, reflect, make. So when you make something, you've got to show it to users so that users can tell you their observations about it, right? So that's your next loop of observe, reflect, make. You go around this loop multiple number of times, and you reach a better product with better product market fit every time, right? So over here, it's pertinent to kind of think what exactly is design, and that leads us to what is design thinking, right? Design is the intent behind an outcome. When we say, oh, this university has more than 700 students, you could also say this university has more than 700 students by design. And the moment you say by design, it adds a layer of intention to it, that this was intentionally done, this was planned, this has a certain amount of thought process behind that. That thought process is called design thinking, right? So when you design think, you form an intent, first of all. You develop empathy for your users, and you form an intent to make a difference. And what is really enterprise design thinking? So design thinking is a very broad framework. Design thinking was first taken out by Stanford. It was co-created and co-invented by IDEO. And there are many kinds of design thinking in the market. So if you go out there, there's the IDEO design thinking method. There's the Stanford design thinking methodology. There's the Google Sprint method. There is the SAP Activate method. There is there is service design. There is systems thinking. There are different kinds of design thinking in the market. So what really is enterprise design thinking? See, what enterprise design thinking does is that it takes the crux of design thinking and marries it to business. That's why it's called enterprise design thinking, because it marries that crux of putting the user at the center and understanding what impact you're having on the business and marrying that together. And that's really what enterprise design thinking is. Um, Enterprise design thinking is based on certain principles and the loop as well as the keys. And I'm just going to explain the principles, the loop, as well as the keys to you right now. So the first principle we have is that we always focus on the user. We always focus on the user. We start an enterprise design thinking workshop or an enterprise design thinking sprint by creating personas, by doing a deep dive on the user to really understand what their pain points are, and then building the rest of the solution around that. So a focus on users is really important, and that's one of the principles of enterprise design thinking. The other principle of enterprise design thinking, and that I think that makes it so uniquely enterprise led and so uniquely fit for enterprises, is the fact that multidisciplinary teams, see those three dots are making an appearance again, right? So the multidisciplinary teams are really, really important. And from our perspective, who are multidisciplinary teams? From our perspective, from a business designer's perspective, multidisciplinary teams are teams who are coming together in order to deliver any digital transformation effort, any product that we're creating and we're releasing into the market. So it could be developers, could be architects, it could be security personnel. When you're looking at financial services, it could be underwriters, it could be security analysts, it could be risk analysts, it could be salespeople. If you're looking at a sales process in the background, it could be salespeople. If you're looking at supply chain, then it could be your workspace personnel, your work floor personnel, so shop floor personnel. If it's a delivery network that you're looking at, then it's also your delivery people. Then it's also your planning people, right? So the team that is needed to make a decision to solve this problem is called the multidisciplinary team. And we go around the loop a multiple number of times because we follow the principle of restless reinvention, that we don't get attached to a product. We don't get attached to a solution. Every prototype is meant to be junked, because at the end of the day, pivoting is a way of life. The market keeps changing all the time. And new products, new benchmarks keep getting released in the market all the time. So even when you're working on a product, you should be ready to junk that prototype in 1 minute flat. And that's really what restless reinvention is. Restless reinvention is a state of mind. It is also a state of being, but it's also a state of mind. And that basically brings us to the loop and the various elements of the loop, which I've just explained to you. There's also the keys that really differentiate enterprise design thinking from the rest of the design thinking methodologies that are available in the market. So the yellow dot always represents the user. It's our sponsor user. The square dot that you see is used for playbacks. Playbacks are a safe place where people can come and talk about their ideas, where they'll not be judged, where nobody will disturb them while they're speaking, where they have the position, the enviable position of a playback master while they're speaking, right? So a playback master, nobody disturbs a playback master. Nobody talks back to a playback master. Even if a delivery boy or a security personnel is giving a playback, then at that point in time, he's a CEO, because he's who we are listening to. And our ears should be open. And the playback master in that minute when he's doing the playback is the CEO of the company. You got to listen to him, right? Then there's the hill. The hill is a commander's intent. And I'll explain this to you as we go forward as well. So focus on user outcomes, restless reinvention, and diverse and empowered teams. I think this the only extra thing that this really talks about is the fact that these teams are empowered. And when I said the everybody who is needed to make a decision for a specific problem is the diverse and empowered team. Not just needed, but also empowered to make a decision on a certain problem are the diverse and empowered team. So we always keep users as a North Star in all kinds of problem solving, critical thinking. If you are to do any kind of framework, if you are to use any kind of framework, then personas and their journeys and the as-is journeys really make your North Star. And that's how you discover what your North Star experience is. And that's how you discover what is that North Star insight that leads you there. So the North Star, if you have one single vision that coincides with the future, and that becomes your North Star, right? And how is your user North Star? Because when you understand that vision, you understand the impact that it has on the user, not just the impact that it has on your bottom line, but also the impact that it has on your user. And that's your North Star. Your bottom line is not your North Star. Because if you keep your bottom line as your North Star, that messes with your priorities and you may never get there. But if you keep your user as your North Star, then your priorities are never messed up. Then your priority is always right. It's always the first priority that works. Yeah? And everything is a prototype, like I said. We pursue perfection with the humility of knowing that nothing is actually perfect. And we're ready to go. We're ready to leave a prototype, even midway, even while it's being tested and invalidated or partially validated, or even fully validated. A prototype could be fully validated, and you could realize that the technology running it is not the right one, and we need another technology. So you may just need to let go of that perfectly vetted prototype because of some other reason. But that's how business works. You don't get attached to anything you do, right? And the biggest importance, and I can't stress this enough, is the fact that if you succeed as a team, you fail as a team, you do it together. The product will never fail. You always, when you come together with teams, sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed. It's okay. Failing is good. Failing gives you insights with which succeeding never could. When you succeed, you don't do a retrospective on that. You don't do a you don't unpack that to see why did we succeed. I hardly hear too many people who go back and do a SWOT analysis on why they succeeded, right? But every time you fail, you analyze. And it is really, really important to analyze. It is really, really important to learn. It's very, very important to observe. And that's where most teams, they fail. So when you do things together as a team, when the entire team is involved and invested, that's what really brings us towards success. If we've got to trust the user, if we've got to have empathy for the user, we've also got to have empathy for each other, for each other's perspective. So if an underwriter says, don't show her birth date, it could increase the risk of her lying about her birth date. And a user experience designer who could come up and say, what if she forgets what birth date she's put in? It's really important to put in her birth date. So this is a form that people are fighting for. But the moment you come together towards one single vision, and that vision says that the user should be comfortable, but at the same time the user should also be secure. So then both of you know what the priority of your opinions is, and that's how teams really come on the same page. is when they not only put themselves in the user's shoes, but they also put themselves in each other's shoes as well. So it's really, really important to work as a team and have empathy and mutual respect for everybody within the team. Um, so the meaningful outcomes that we generate are always an outcome of research. And I spoke about our research methods a little bit before, but everybody's research methods, not just ours, should ideally be a triad of methods that we use. And what is the triad really? The triad is a triangulation of the truth. We all know from the financial services industry that even underwriters, when they look at a certain piece of truth, when they look at my form and I say I'm 47, they will definitely want to see my documentation and confirm from there whether I'm 47 or not, right? They will also want to see my 10th certificate to know whether I'm indeed 47 on the paperwork or not, right? So what have they done? They basically triangulated the truth. So we as researchers also need to triangulate the truth. And usually the best way to triangulate truth is to use multiple sources. The first source is always the stakeholder's mouth. What does the stakeholder say? So if it's a IT stakeholder, or if it's a customer service stakeholder, or if it's any other stakeholder, their experiences with the users far outweigh any kind of research that you can actually do within the users, right? So you can only conduct a certain amount of research within the users. You can only interview 5 to 50 people, frankly, within a user set, right? Without going fuzzy on the data. But at the same time, a stakeholder may have engaged with 50 users a day. He may have a much broader perspective than any research that you can do. So it's really, really important to be able to triangulate that truth that you found through primary research in what the stakeholder says as well. It could be completely contrary. As long as you can read between the lines and find why the stakeholder statement is contrary, that's where the analysis, that's where the synthesis, that's where the value and the insight actually lies. So when you do research, it is not just important to do research, it's also important to triangulate. Secondary research is another source where you can triangulate from. Secondary research, what is secondary research? Secondary research is Google search in today's day and age. In about when I started my career, secondary research used to be going to the library and finding the right books and talking to the right people. Right? Today, Google has all the answers. Right? So you also search for secondary data and understand whether the impact of the in-depth analysis that you are finding out right now is correctly represented by the larger subset of data that you're looking at. So let's say your data, your primary data tells you that this user does not want to reveal their name when they're booking their insurance. Right? It could say that. It doesn't usually say that, but it could say that this user does not want to reveal their name when they're doing their insurance. And a stakeholder could come and say to you, my God, these users, they just don't want to tell their name. Yeah, I don't know how to find out their name. Can we find out the name from some paperwork that we have? That's a stakeholder talking to you. And at this point in time, your job is not to go hunt for the right paperwork. Your job is to understand, why does the user say no, right? And then when you bring the impact on the secondary ecosystem, which means that you could find out that on the card, on the form where a user has to put in their name, that's where the most dropout rates are. That's a secondary piece of data that you haven't experienced yourself, but you can get from a secondary source. And now that secondary piece of data is validating the statement that the user is making, right? So now you're absolutely sure of what that insight is and what you can take forward and what you can fix, right? So when you're doing your research, when you're observing, it is really important to observe through multiple methods. It is really important to use multiple methods to triangulate the truth. And sometimes, yeah, it's not as prescriptive as that, where you say you have to take secondary research, you have to take stakeholder data, you have to take primary research. It's not as prescriptive as that. Sometimes you find 2 sources, sometimes you find 5, Sometimes you find one source only, right? But try and triangulate as much as possible. When you do, your truth is validated, and it becomes the authentic source of insight for everybody else as well. So the just as important as doing good research is understanding what is the reflection that you need to do on top of the research. And that's completely comes from the problem statement that you're affecting. So let's say your problem statement talks about a paradigm, which is a systemic paradigm, and it has to be solved through a systemic solution. So let me tell you a story from a service that we were creating. We've just presented on the World Design Organization stage and presented a service called UMA. It's a pregnancy service meant for rural pregnant women when they have any issues. And what we did when we looked at the research was we decided this is a pregnancy, the support which comes through in a pregnancy doesn't just come from one source. It comes from multiple touch points, multiple layers. So ideally, it is a service. And if it is a service, we should look at it from a service design lens and understand what are the issues in the service. Also, it is a paradigm, because the paradigm says is that men don't get involved in pregnancies because it's a woman's job, and that's a paradigm. Everybody believes it, and because everybody believes it, nobody questions it, right? And if there is a paradigm to be changed, there is a focused method out there to look at how we can change paradigms, how we can unpack paradigms. The method is called the iceberg method, to break it down. Or it could be that you need to look at a very, very complex process and you need to break it down into individual steps. What do you need to do now? There are methods available for that as well. There's a method available called the draw toast method, which allows you to break a very complex, very subjective step down into multiple points of view, taken from many stakeholders' points of view, and put that together as a single simple method and understand what is that journey that a process takes. So similarly, there are many methods, like if you need to look at the future of a product. So how resilient is this product to the changes in the ecosystem that are currently coming? If you want to look at it from that perspective, maybe you want to use a systems thinking lens. So there are many lenses that you use during reflection, and the using the right lens is superbly important. Is superbly important at this point. In enterprise design thinking, what we do is that we look at it from a business pain point lens and a user pain point lens. But when we, let's say, put together a service, let's say we putting a service together for a bank, which is an account opening service. Now that is a service. So we look at it from a service design perspective. So that's where reflection becomes very, very contextual and very, very subjective to the problem statement that you're affecting. So it's really important here to learn about the various frameworks which are out there and to keep practicing them. There are many ways in which you can reach out and practice frameworks which people engage with all the time. There's a Future Foresight Guild, which enables you to understand how people use future foresight to envision the future for their company and then break it down. It's called backcasting, that process. You break it down into what are the deliverables for us? What do we have to do to get there, right? So similarly, there is a Service Designers Guild, which is available on LinkedIn. It is available in multiple social networks and multiple places. Even Medium has a Service Designers Guild. So you can reach out there and reach out to people who are using these frameworks. There is the business model canvas, which allows you to understand how a specific business is being put together. And in business design, it's very useful. In business design, although you use the enterprise design thinking methodology, where you do a certain amount of research in your users and you do go through this observe, reflect, make process, but during reflection, you use the BMC, which is the business model canvas, to put a framework around the research data that you gathered, and to extract insights and plans from them. So when you reflect, the method is superbly important. And that really comes to ideas, and ideas, I think, are my favorite part of design thinking, because that's where you go free. That's what is free and unfettered, you know. And the more ideas you generate, the more visual you are about ideas, the quicker the ideas come. And I'll explain to you why quick ideation is really important. The quicker the ideas come to you, the much better it is. So that's what the keys are all about. Sponsor users help us, aligning our reality. We get called upon to do many things. One day we're creating a cockpit for a pilot, and the next day we might be just, creating um, a better way to deliver presents to your loved one. You know, so our contexts are very different when we're designing, and so will your context be when you hit the enterprise circles. Your context will also be very different. And how do you align your intent with the user's context, with the user's reality? By having a user on the table. Because you've never landed a plane, you won't be able to land a plane, even if you're asked to, even if you're trained to, right? But a user who does land a plane can actually tell you the way you've designed, the way the pressure gauge, let's say, displays, may or may not be right for him, right? If he can read it right, then that's the validation you need. And that's how you quickly pass, quickly succeed, and quickly fail, because you've got the sponsor user right there to help you pass things and fail things. Um, like I said, playbacks align our intent across teams, across time, because they never fall out of sync. Hills are basically statements, and those statements are actually written as who, what, wow statements. So who represents a user? So a hill could say that my user will be able to do this in this kind of a way. So when you say my user will be able to do this, that explains the wow, the what, and in this way will be the wow statement. So you could say that um, my user Akshay, who is an intern who's come to the bank to start his first FD, will be able to open that FD in 5 minutes flat. And now you've got that vision statement in front of you. You've got that hill in front of you. Now, everybody who works, be it a developer, or be it a tester, or be it a project manager, or be it, any part of the leadership, any part of the product team, any part of the marketing team, when they come together on this intent, if they keep that intent in front of them, saying this has to be 5 minutes flat, they're able, when you put vision in front of people, they're able to adjust their actions to be able to get to that vision. So having a vision statement is, as an output of design thinking, is superbly important, because it ties your teams together, because it ties the intent of the teams, of the various multidisciplinary stakeholders together, where every stakeholder needs to understand this has to be done in 5 minutes flat. So an underwriter needs to understand, how can I underwrite this new account which is opening in 5 minutes flat? What do I need to see? What do I need to consider? A bank manager can understand, how do I help him in filling the form so that this service can be done in 5 minutes flat. A developer will be able to understand that interface that I'm making, it has to take it not more than 2-3 minutes for him to fill, because the whole process has to be done in 5 minutes flat. So now that hill statement is guiding and defining everything that everybody in that team does. And that's how you reach success. You reach success when you work together as a team, and you work together towards a purpose. And that's what hills give you. They give you a purpose to work towards. Now see, let's just see an example of how this works. Yeah. So this is how we incite empathy for users. We put the user in the center of our screen. Bit of sunshine coming in. So we put the user in the center of our screen, and we say, okay, this is the user. Now, when he is looking at a problem, what is he saying? What is he doing? What is he thinking? And what is he feeling? Right? And you put that in different parts of the quadrant. Saying and doing is something you observe during research. These are observed things, right? When you do research, you understand what users are saying. Users will say that to you. And what they're doing, what you're observing their behavior as, is what they're doing. right? So saying and doing are observed things. But when you come to think and feels, and they may sound very, very similar, thinking and feeling for us are very similar things, are not very different things. But these are inferences that we take from what he's saying. If he's saying, "Oh my God, I have to park again," or "Oh my God, I have to find a parking space," then I can bet you that behind that he's thinking, "Why do I have to park every time I come here?" So the moment you look at says, you understand what he's thinking. And thinking, basically, how you differentiate it with feeling is that thinking is what you do from the frontal lobe of your brain. So it's conscious thought. It manifests itself in dialogues that you have with yourself. And what it really defines is that it defines your worldview. It defines how you perceive things. Your worldview may contain the fact that it may be difficult for you to find the car if you put it in a parking space very quickly. One, it may be difficult for you to find the parking space, so you may be wasting some time, and you may not have that time, and that's part of that worldview, right? That worldview also comes from the fact that, oh, my friend's car got stolen last time and he parked it in this kind of a parking lot. Maybe my car can also get stolen. That's also my worldview, right? So a lot of these things that I think about come from the worldview that I have. So it's going to take some more time. So they also come from the worldview that you have. But feeling is something that you feel inside. It comes from your heart. It comes from the back of your brain, where emotions lie, where your emotional center of the brain is. And feelings are really emotions. And emotions, when they come out, are maybe confusion, maybe anxiety, maybe nervousness, maybe happiness, maybe elation, maybe ambition, maybe a bit of worry also. So these things, when they when they come out in your feelings. And when you're able to put that together as a picture, what the user is saying, doing, thinking, and feeling, you're able to develop what is called a human centric point of view, which is a point of view that revolves around the human being and the task that the human being wants to fulfill, rather than the task in front of you when you're designing something. So let me explain that a little bit. So let's look at travel. So when you're designing a travel website, you may want to look at, where do I want the banner to be? Where do I want the price to display? Where do I want the picture to be? Where do I want the rating to come? Where do I want, X, Y, and Z? So how many CTAs should I have? What should expand on click? How should it be sorted? Where should the search toolbar display? All of that, those are decisions that come to you, but those are product centric decisions, and they cannot come to you out of the blue, where a person will ask you out of the blue saying, how many search results for a travel page should I have? And without you having any piece of data on how many things a person considers when they're going for travel, would you be able to answer that correctly? You would not be able to answer that correctly. And that worldview that a designer has is called the product centric worldview. Whereas a user experience designer and a user led designer will immediately understand that through this page, the person wants to get here. The person actually wants to book a ticket to Eiffel Tower because he wants to celebrate his anniversary in the Eiffel Tower lawn. So that's a user experience designer will understand that emotion and build for that. And when you build for that, you don't just build for flights. You build for research also, because research is a step that the user does when he goes to Rome or when he goes to Paris to celebrate his anniversary. He wants to know what is the best place to celebrate, what's the most romantic place in the world to go and celebrate his anniversary, right? There is also preparation that he does, which includes packing, which includes taking care of certain things like pets, and could be children, could be elderly people, could be his job, that he has to take care of. So you got to understand that when a person is traveling, his decision in terms of when I should travel, it doesn't need to be immediate, and it may or may not be immediate as well, because he needs to understand all these things before he's going to make that booking. And maybe you can solve for that so that he can make that booking much better on your travel interface. The fact that he may need help when he's at an airport, what is that help that he may need? He may need the flight number. He may need, what gate he's going from. So all that information comes from the user's information needs and not the page's information needs, right? And when they land there, they'll definitely want to take a taxi. So when they land there, should we tell them what gate they're landing at, so they're able to call that taxi to that gate? So there are a lot of thought process that you need to put into creation of anything when you make it from a user's perspective. And how do you do that? You put the pain points in front of you and you say, I'm going to solve for these pain points today. And how do you solve? You solve when you ideate. And that's what really brings us to the idea curve. Yeah. And we also have a sip of coffee. Could you close that door? And this one. Yeah, also. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully this should be better. Yeah. All right. So ideation is problem solving without any limitations. Is that too dark, Deborah? Is it too dark? Can you guys see my face? A little bit dark. Could you put on the light? Turn the light, please. Yeah. So when you ideate, you want to let go of all limitations that you may have in your mind. And how do those limitations come about? Those limitations come about when you try and make the quality of your ideas better, right? When you judge your ideas. So the first piece of advice that we give people who are ideating is the fact that defer judgment. Don't judge your ideas. Don't judge them as absurd. Don't judge them as can that actually be done? Don't judge them as outlandish. Don't judge them as too weak. Bring them out on the table. Write them down, because it is really important to put down all ideas that you get. And I'm going to tell you this shaking bear story. It's a really interesting story. But first, let me explain to you what the idea curve is. How is this not moving? Yeah. So when you first start ideating, right, the first idea you usually get is the output of a lot of processing that your brain does. And a lot of the processing that your brain does is very judgmental. So the first few ideas that you usually get are fairly boring ideas. So we ask people to put down their ideas very, very quietly and very silently. But we also ask them to ideate again and again and again and again. Because as you go down that idea line, right, towards time, as you ideate more and more, as you generate more and more ideas, what happens is that you go towards the brilliant and you go towards the absurd. And both the brilliant and the absurd are really important in design thinking. The reason why both the brilliant and the absurd are important is because the brilliant ones may sound very brilliant, but it could be that they may not be feasible at the end of the day. So you've got to have backup plans, right? And sometimes your absurd ideas are great backup plans. They're wonderful backup plans. So I'm going to explain prioritization to you also. But first, let me go back and explain to you the shaking bear story, because I do want to wake you guys up. I've been giving you theory for so long, and I'm sure everybody must have gone to sleep. So here's a little story. We put down about 30,000 kilometers of electricity poles in the Arctic on the South Pole, right? So what we did was that we put down this huge electricity network and this entire sensor array, etc., to be able to produce electricity in a very optimal basis. What we realized after putting that whole power station in and putting up all the electricity poles through 30,000 kilometers was that every time it snowed, the snow would accumulate on top of the poles. So each pole had a bunch of snow on it, right? And when snow accumulates over something, it reduces the temperature that something has. And as we know, at very cold temperatures, electricity cannot be conducted. So what used to happen is that it used to snow, and then in the night it used to get cold, and the snow would turn into ice, and the poles would stop conducting electricity. So there are so many there were so many solutions that we generated in order to Chitranshi, I see you asked a question. I'll answer that question after I finish this. Yeah. So we saw that laying down those electricity poles was absolutely no use at all, because at the end of the day, every time it snowed, and it snowed a lot in the Arctic, it snows a lot there. So people used to stop getting electricity. Now that's not nice, right? So we all came together on the table and we started generating ideas. Some people generated an idea where they said, we should have big fans that we put up every 5 kilometers. We have big fans, and when it starts snowing, then the fans come on and they don't let the snowflakes settle on the electricity poles. Other people said, you know what, we should have sensors. We should have sensors that we embed in the pole, and when it gets to be really cold, then the sensor will start heating up, because it's a thermal sensor. It'll start heating up, and it'll melt the ice, and therefore we won't have any snow accumulation. That's quite an interesting, very sane, very brilliant idea, and of course that guy was an IBMer, right? So yeah, that comes from there as well. Very technology oriented also. But we had an IXer in there, a designer, right? So what he said, that we should have a teddy bear come and shake the poles. Every time it snows, we should train a bear who come and just shakes the pole. And if you start shaking the pole, then the snow will not settle there, and we'll not have this problem. So everybody laughed. But we have a tradition in design thinking. We don't let the absurd ideas go out of the table. We put them up front and highlight them. So they're right there, winking at us. And the absurd idea was put up on the table right up there. When we did an analysis of all of the cost of putting sensors, what we realized that the cost of putting these sensors in is perhaps more than the cost of the electricity system itself. So now we can't do that. Now we can't put sensors. Now what do we do? So we went back to our earlier ideas and we said, okay, what's behind this shaking bear story? What's behind this story? Let's look at it. So we looked at it and we said, vibration is the answer. It's not, the bear is not the answer. The vibration is the thing that's getting this done. And then we also looked at the big fan theory, and we said, these big fans may help. Yeah, you're right. So then another person who put both these ideas together and formed a bridge between the ideas, and that is called idea clustering and big idea formation, right? So idea clustering and big idea formation is something that we do in every design thinking, is that we put a lot of ideas together and we see what is the relationship between these ideas. How can these ideas be built upon each other? So in the clustering activity, what he arrived at, and it was exactly the right solution, was the fact that if you flew a helicopter over all those immediately after a snowstorm, and helicopters as it is fly in those areas, the helicopters as it is fly. So when we flew a helicopter above those poles, then the vibration and the air from the helicopter blades will actually get the snow down, and that's exactly what happened. So all they needed to do was just deviate. There are these guards that go out there after snowstorms to see whether anybody is stuck there or not. So just deviate a guard so he flies over the electricity poles as well, and that actually gets rid of the snow completely. So that's why I think ideation is one of the most core and the most important and the most valuable activity. And ideas is where we're actually synthesizing all that information that we've gotten. We've gotten user personas, we've got their journeys, we've got their pain points, we've got their their problems. We've immersed ourselves into their barriers, we've immersed ourselves into their lives. We understand them, and if we understand them, what is it that we can do to make a difference? That's where the ideas start getting more and more valuable and more usable. And that's where the value of design thinking comes in. So, Chitranshi, you're asking, there are many points of success. How do we become fault tolerant in this? Right? The point over here is not to become fault tolerant, but to become fault resilient. And there is a difference between both of them, right? Fault tolerant is when you think the fault is a bad thing, right? And you say, okay, I'll take it, even if it's a bad thing, right? If you become fault resilient, which means basically, yeah, there's a fail, there's a problem. Why don't we pick that up, recover from that, and move on and apply those learnings everywhere else? That's where agility lies. That's beyond success. That's how you get there. That's how you get to success. You become fault resilient. So it doesn't matter if you fail. It doesn't matter if you fall. It doesn't matter if there is a fault anywhere. If there is a fault, that means you can fix it, right? And it's very good that the fault came out right now rather than later when it could have created a bigger problem, right? So faults are good. Problems are good. Failures are good. Experimentation is good. Always getting success and being first time right is not good, because believe you me, if you think you're first time right, you're actually not. You can do out there and do a usability study, and you can go out there and do a usability study, and you would know that you're actually not first time right. So that's how fault resilience or fault tolerance actually goes. Then we have something called a prioritization grid, in which we vote for things and we look at them from the point of view. From the point of view of what impact it has on the user. So on the x-axis, if you see, is the impact to the user, and on the y-axis, on the x-axis, if you see, is the feasibility for us, and the y-axis you see is the impact to the user. So we actually look at each of those ideas generated from that lens, how feasible it is for us and how impactful it is to the user, and we are able to zero in to the MVP, what we call the minimum viable product. And that's really important from an enterprise design thinking perspective, because enterprises don't want to go the whole hog and engage into 5-year plans and 7-year plans and 9-year plans. They want to be able to hit the market in 3 months. If they want to hit the market in 3 months, what is that no-brainer that they should do in order to hit the market in a nice way? What are the big bets that they can start working on now? What are the utilities that they can start building now, so that when they go to the market with the no-brainers, they can slowly and steadily add them as time comes along? So this is how ideas get prioritized on the prioritization grid. The prioritization grid is a business implement. It is a business process, and it really brings about the capability to make a very quick change, to be very, very quick in your speed to market. Your speed to market happens very quickly if you pick up the no-brainers first and you work on them and you learn from them, and then you put in the big bets in the utilities. Sajeev, you're saying corporates are quite a challenging environment. What would you advise students who need to break out of a stereotypical society where it's encouraged to go with the flow? You're right. Ravi Teja is the CEO of Robosoft. And a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with him where he was talking about unlearning to learn. And at that point in time, I think I got a bit irked by that concept. Why do you have to unlearn to learn? Sometimes you can use your previous knowledge also. You should remember everything you learn, because kabhi na kabhi kuch na kuch to use ho gayi, right? So I was very against this thing. Why do you have to unlearn? I think you should constantly learn, right? You don't have to unlearn. So we had that debate. But you're absolutely right. The stereotypical ways in which we used to work are truly ways which we need to unlearn, right? For example, now if you see, the focus is on experiential learning and understanding something before imbibing it rather than rote learning, right? We had to unlearn to do rote learning, right? You know, what you used to say, A for apple, B for boy, C mane cat, D mane dog, and everybody knew it by rote. Nobody could recognize what a D or a C was. Sorry, you were saying something. Please go ahead. Hello.
No, ma'am, I think you misheard. No one was
I
saying that.
misheard, did I? Okay, okay. So basically, that rote learning we had to unlearn, right? So there are concepts that you do need to unlearn while you're learning new ways of doing things. And design thinking and agile truly do come together in a brand new way of working. It is truly a brand new way of doing things. And believe you me, I come from a waterfall methodology. I come from a waterfall mindset where I say one thing has to be done, then another thing, then another thing, then another thing, right? That's how we used to do things, right? But now, as more and more I adopt agile and design thinking methods, I do realize that starting multiple things together and bringing them together, orchestrating them together into one big thing actually can be very, very rewarding, you know, very, very rewarding from a business perspective, very, very rewarding from a designer's perspective, from an analyst's perspective, and from a business's perspective. It can be very, very rewarding to do that, to start multiple things at the same time and end them by orchestrating or bringing them together. That's a great way to do things, and it's completely the antithesis of how we used to do things earlier. So yeah, you have to unlearn a bit in order to learn new things. Yeah. uh, So yeah, I have another video, and the video really talks about the power of stories, because I don't think you can do anything in either management or design or business today without telling a story right. Sometimes the stories are told through data, sometimes stories are told through logic, sometimes stories are told through emotion, but stories are always told when you're beginning to make a difference. Because when you make a difference, when you make a transformation happen, you've got to tell the people what you're transforming to. You've got to tell them that story of what you're going to be, what is going to be the difference in your life when I make this come true. So let's look at the story of Google. Yeah. So tell the story, and tell the story right, because it's extremely important to be able to tell stories to get alignment with people, to move on anything. You have the best intentions in the world. You can be a marketer who wants to go out there and run blitzkrieg campaigns in the market and garner so much user engagement that it's amazing, right? You may have the highest ambitions. You may have the highest benchmarks also. You may create campaigns which are fantastic as well. But as long as that vision is not communicated to the right people, which means the CEO doesn't hear you talking about making a difference, and this is how I will make a difference, who's going to fund your Facebook campaign, right? And Similarly, there may be other things that you want to do which require the IT team support or the management team support or any other support. Wherever you need support for alignment, telling the story is a really, really important part of design thinking. Telling the story to the development teams as a hill statement so that they can bring that hill statement true. The hill statements are also stories, right? There are the stories that you tell of your to be system, saying, if I do this for you, if I implement, let's say, Adobe Experience Manager for you, then you will be able to release campaigns within the market and get immediate feedback and AI driven analytics from it, right? Now, that statement is a story, right? And how do you tell those stories? It's really, really important to learn how to do that in order to solve problems. Otherwise, your solutions may just completely lie with you alone. You may not be able to do anything with those solutions at all, right? So, bringing alignment is where it's really important. Kajal, I can see there are a couple of questions here. I'm going to answer the questions as well. But meanwhile, can somebody tell me what this scene is?
Spider-Man. It's a
Yes,
Hello, am I audible? It is from Spider-Man movie.
absolutely. It's from the movie Spider-Man. I think Spider-Man's granddad tells him with great power comes great responsibility. So when you solve a problem, you have a solution, you got the power to really make a difference towards achieving the outcome that you're promising with that solution. But with every responsibility, with every power comes a responsibility. And that responsibility is to stay ethical. That responsibility is to stay sane, is to stay safe, is to stay resilient and sustainable so that the future that's coming on is not riddled by mistakes like the Facebook infinite scroll, right? Which has actually reduced the attention spans of our entire generations of children ahead of us, right? So there are many things like that which are not ethical for us to put out there in the market. And every time we make something, we should think about what are the ethics behind it. Are we ethical when we're doing it, right? Um, let me just answer these couple of questions before I move forward. Yeah.
Mom, if you're comfortable, we can take them in the end. So at least the flow won't break then.
Sure. How much
Okay.
time do we have left? How much time do we have left, Deborah?
Dr.
How
Ranjana,
much
could you
time
please
do we
answer that?
Basically, we have capped this session for 1 hour total, ma'am. So if we can wind it up as soon as we can, that would
Yeah,
be
I
great,
think
ma'am.
so
Thank
because
you.
we don't have much time left, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
I'll just very quickly speak about ethics and I'll close it, then I'll answer the questions. Yeah. So, because every time you design a solution, you have a responsibility. The responsibility is to keep it ethical. The responsibility to understand is to understand how sustainable it is. If this feature is out there in the market for 10 years, again and again and again, people get exposed to it, to this product, what will happen? Are there environmental consequences? Are there human consequences? Are there behavioral consequences? Are there impacts that are that go far beyond the impact that we want to have? Because the butterfly effect is actually real, you know. So and is it something safe for users to do? Is it acceptable? Do they accept doing it? Do they accept the solution that you give them, right? And there are many methodologies to gauge that as well. This is the design for AI methodology, which looks at AI and understands how can you put good AI together, and how can you also look at it from an ethics perspective to know what is the far-reaching impact of it. And similarly, there are many other methodologies. There is the design for sustainability methodology, which looks at biomimicry and how you can use biomimicry in your ideation in order to mimic nature. So there are many frameworks, and it helps to know these frameworks in order to work with them. So in closing, what I'd like to say is whenever you see a new framework, reach out for it, experience it, understand what are the ramifications of it. Because in addition to learning how to manage things, you also need to learn how to design them right. And that's something these frameworks will be able to give you. Thank you. I'm going to ask, I'm going to answer these couple of questions. So a problem well defined is a problem half solved. I completely agree with that statement, which is why the first step of design thinking, if you go into the design thinking methodology and framework, the first step is called problem statement definition. We pay a lot of attention with defining the problem statement. The problem statement has to be smart. It has to be specific. It has to be measurable. It has to be achievable. It has to be reasonable, right? So we make very smart problem statements in collaboration with our clients, and it's a good idea when you're solving a problem is to craft a problem statement in which you collaborate with the users whom it's affecting, so then you are able to craft it right as a problem statement. And problem statements, you're absolutely right, it is superbly important to well define the problem before you go towards solving it. Um, And Kajal is asking, restless reinvention is quite brutal. Where do we reinforce the strength to let go? Traditionally, we come from attachments. You're so right. You're absolutely right about that, Kajal. We as a race, and even as a species, are very prone to attachments, and we get really attached to the things that we make, especially the things that we make, right? And what you need to do is actually be the antithesis of that, to not be attached to anything that you make, right? You should be attached to the outcome, not to the vehicle that gets you to the outcome. And that's where your attachment, I think you've got to train your mind to attach yourself to the outcome, and rather than the vehicle that gets you to the outcome. And that's where you will be able to be resilient enough to let go of the vehicle quite easily. Does that answer your question, Kaja? Super. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I guess no, that was utterly delightful, ma'am. That was amazing. I have loved how we have gone from learning to just define design and to limitations, judging your own ideas over so many stories. It was very fascinating for me as well. So I must say I do have one question. Let's just wind up with this. That after having read about you and now listening to you with having your fingers in so many pies, I realized design thinking is not just something you do, it's almost a lifestyle. Yes. So, where did it all come from? Where did it all begin?
Well, actually, my design thinking journey began with IBM. When I joined IBM, I did not know what design thinking was. And today, after 6 years, I stand as a design thinking thought leader. And I'd really like to credit IBM with that entire journey, because it's being in the organization has taught me, has made me a teacher, has made, I mean, in fact, in the first month that I joined, I just took to the methodology immediately, and I was a coach immediately in the first month that I joined. Because then, coming from a design background, you understand these things quite implicitly, right? What personas are, what tasks are, what pain points are, what empathy maps are. Those are the tools of the trade that we use. So all I had to do was string them into a certain process. But now that I've experienced this process with multiple number of clients, multiple number of projects, it's brought it home to me that it's a good framework to use, and it's probably the best framework to use in conjunction with other frameworks, so that you can start right, start with the user.
Oh, well, that was lovely. Miss Ekta, it was indeed a great learning for all of us. Thank you so much for enlightening us and letting us get an abundance of valuable insights for today. That was really an amazing experience for, I believe, for everyone who was listening, because especially for the students, and I believe the agenda for today's session is fulfilled with the discussion we have had. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and good luck.
Yes. Now I, on behalf of Amity University Haryana, I've been given the opportunity to extend my word of thanks on behalf of IIC, AUH, I would like to express our gratitude to our Honorable Founder President, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, for visionary mission on education, our Honorable Chancellor, Dr. Asim Chauhan, for his foresight and innovation, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. P.B. Sharma, Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Padmakali Banerjee, and Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor here with us, Professor Dr. Vikas Madhukar, President of Institute Innovation Council at AUH, and all the esteemed dignitaries, heads of institutions, faculty members, and students for their presence and contribution in making this webinar a grand success. And our deepest gratitude is extended to Ms. Ekta Jafri for taking out time from her busy schedule to grace this event. And thanks to Dr. Isha Jayanti for her support. I extend my thanks to all the students and team members, IIC, ABS, and ESEL, Amity University, for organizing a proficient talk. Thank you so much. And last, not the least, to all the organizing team and IT support for today's success. And to everybody here, thank you for joining in. I'd now cordially request IT to close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. Thank you so much.